Thank you very much, Lynn, and thank all of you. It's really, I'm honored to be here with you, and actually very proud of all of your accomplishments and the leadership that you are showing in your own countries. So welcome again. We have a great panel today, and really our panel is to kick off some of the discussion that you'll be having later this afternoon, and to set the context for some of what we're going to be discussing around leadership and service to communities. Our panelists are, in their own work, they've helped to support and develop leaders. And they've also shown innovative solutions to social issues in their own communities. We're interested today in exploring with them ways in which we all, both collectively and individually, work to support and increase opportunities, motivation, capacity, and infrastructure so that more young leaders can emerge. We want them to tell us how they've approached some of these social issues and the innovative solutions, the ways in which they've learned from others, and how they've helped other young leaders collectively thrive. I'd like to give you an introduction, and then we're going to hear directly from our panelists. Fred, as you've heard, is the founder and CEO of an African Leadership Academy. Fred is originally from Ghana, but he's lived and worked in 7 African nations. He's worked with McKinsey & Company and founder of a top elementary school in Botswana. He has a BA degree from Macalester College and an MBA from Stanford University. One of Fred's first experiences in terms of service and developing young leaders was when he worked to launch a school in Africa at the age of 18. He helped his mother establish a primary school in Botswana. And essentially, he was the full-time headmaster of the school for almost a year, so definitely showed a young leadership at that age. At 24, he was the founding member of a biotech startup in Cape Town. And he also, at 27, got involved in launching another educational venture, a summer camp, that focused on developing leaders from around the world. And Virginia is a returned Peace Corps volunteer. She's started Educate Tomorrow, and she's had a great experience in this program. She's a graduate of University of Wisconsin. As she was a Peace Corps volunteer in Niger, she speaks fluent Zarma and has a working knowledge of some Tadausic, French, Spanish, and German. She is the recipient of the Junior League of Miami 2006 Women Who Make a Difference Award. I'd like to ask each of our panelists to tell us a bit about their work briefly. We'll start with Fred, and then I have some other questions I'd like you to talk about. Fred?
Sure. So in 2003, I was reflecting on my experience of living and working in different parts of Africa. As you mentioned, I was born in Ghana, but I'd grown up all across the continent. And one thing I came to realize was that everywhere I'd been, I just saw tremendous potential and tremendous opportunity in Africa. But somehow this potential wasn't being realized. The thing that I came to believe, and together with the others that I got together in starting the academy, was that the big missing link was leadership. We just didn't have effective leaders in all sectors of our society, and this had been the problem essentially, for the last 50 years. And so, in considering this, wondered, is there a way that we can actually change this so that the next 50 years looks different? And instead of hoping that good leaders emerge, we just thought, is there a way that we can actually proactively develop the leaders that we need to actually engineer our own leaders? And so our goal is to create 6,000 leaders for Africa over the next 50 years. And really, we thought that trying to reform the existing leaders would be too difficult. But we need to groom a whole new generation. And so that's the idea. We identify young people. We start working with them typically between the age of 16 and 18 from all the 54 countries of Africa. And then we bring them initially into a school for 2 years in South Africa. But our plan is to work with them throughout their lives. So when they're in college, we'll have a program for them when they graduate from college to help facilitate their careers. And then as they develop as leaders in their 30s and 40s and 50s, we're with them. So what we essentially end up doing is creating this network of leaders who can transform Africa and solve our biggest challenges for us.
Great,
so that's the idea.
Thank you. Virginia, tell us about Educate Tomorrow. Why did you start it, and what is the mission?
Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here with you this evening. Educate Tomorrow started actually well before Educate Tomorrow started. I was admitted into the Peace Corps, and the reason why I wanted to serve with the United States Peace Corps is because I had my own circumstances for which I came, where I grew up in a family of 8 children. We were pretty poor in the Wisconsin area, and when I was given the opportunity to attend higher education, I knew that a part of my life was going to be giving back, that I wanted to serve other people who were in similar situations as myself. And when I was selected to participate in the Peace Corps program in Niger, West Africa, it was a dream come true. Because now I could take my own experiences into that point, I was 23, and see what I could do to help others. And when I started with the Peace Corps, I was an agroforestry volunteer. So I was sent over to help with desert restoration projects. And very quickly realized that if we're going to really create some long-term sustainable change, it's going to be a little bit more than planting trees. We're going to have to systematically change how people think about themselves, and the only real way to do this is through education. So one of my first projects as a Peace Corps volunteer was to start a school. There was no school in the region. In fact, there wasn't another school for another 6 or 7 kilometers. And I had some resistance initially because historically all the schools were run in French language. And I lived in a former slave village of Bellas, and they weren't comfortable with going to school in French or even participating in other cultural groups because of the language and cultural divide. So we got the community leaders together and we started a school in local language. And it was one of the first local language schools in Niger. And that process and going through all of those mechanisms to start that school became what is the foundation of Educate Tomorrow today. I was given the opportunity, I parlayed that opportunity into helping other people, and then wanted to continue to support the programs we started in Niger. But then when I returned to the United States, I wanted to help the people in my own backyard. And a problem became very apparent to me through my sister, who had also been working with some disadvantaged youth. The United States has about 500,000 kids who are without parents or are basically orphaned. And so we needed to figure out how to get these kids who are 16, 17, 18 years old, never going to be adopted. We got to figure out how to get them graduated from high school and into college. And there's amazing opportunities for them, but nobody there to guide them. So Educate Tomorrow's foundation in the United States is to create life coaching and mentoring and life skills for kids who are aging out of the United States foster care system and getting them into college so that they can be the next generation of leaders as well.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Fred, let me come back to you and talk a little bit about the work. You're already creating lots of new opportunities for young leaders. How do you envision expanding this to more trainings for the development of even more leaders?
In the long term, we could consider setting up satellite campuses around the continent. So we could have a campus in West Africa, one in North Africa, one in East Africa, and so on. And then you have a network of leadership academies around the continent. But it just takes so much effort and money to build one of these academies that's a long-term plan. Our short-term strategy for having broader impact is to really share our methodology and with schools throughout the continent, and to train teachers, so train the trainer approach, so that they can then replicate what we're doing in their different schools. Because really, the power of what we're doing is not in the buildings. It's much more in the methodology. Things like the way we teach our classes, where it's not a teacher in front of the class writing and the students memorizing and that's it. It's really engaging them in dialogue and getting them to think for themselves. those kinds of methodologies, and our curriculum, where we write case studies on African leaders that our students can actually study and learn from and so on. So those kinds of things we want to share with schools throughout the continent, and really serve as a source of innovation in how we educate young people throughout the continent. And that way we think we can have much broader impact. Another thing we're looking at doing in the intermediate term is we want to create this thing called the African Baccalaureate. Because most education systems in Africa are replicants or remnants of the colonial education systems. So, I remember in my geography class, I would learn about the American prairies and, wheat farming in Iowa. And in history, I learned about the Franco-Prussian War and the Russian Revolution. I never learned African history or African geography. And so we want to create a world-class curriculum for Africa and then spread to schools throughout Africa, much like the International Baccalaureate actually came out of one school, the International School of Geneva, in the 60s, and it's now spread to thousands of schools around the world. We want to create the African Baccalaureate and set that as the gold standard for high school education in Africa. So those are some ideas we have.
And how are you recruiting teachers to be a part of your academy?
Well, we search throughout Africa and throughout the world. We currently have 35 faculty on our staff, and they've been chosen from about 1,200 applicants from all over the world. About 70% of them are Africans from the continent, and then 30% are from outside of Africa. And we also look for people who come from different industries and so on to come and apply their real life experience of leadership onto our campus. So for example, our economics teacher is a former investment banker from Ghana. Or we have someone who used to work in with TechnoServe and Google in Ghana running a business plan competition, and she came on and was teaching our young leaders entrepreneurship on our campus. So those are the kinds of faculty. And we have every single week we bring different leaders onto our campus to share their personal experiences with our. So Desmond Tutu has been to speak there. Graça Machel, Nelson Mandela's wife. Various leaders come every single week to share their experiences of leadership with these young leaders.
Great, that's terrific. Virginia, I was really impressed when you talked about your where you grew up and your commitment to service and giving back and feeling like you were called to give back. How do you motivate young people toward public service? So many young people are jaded about public service. They either think it doesn't make a difference, it's not worth their time. You've learned that by serving, you are served as well. But how do you motivate other young people to get engaged in giving back in your community here?
Right. Well, the way that I see it is that nobody has ever pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps. Every person or every great thing that's ever been done was done by a collaborative people, and you had assistance from mentors and teachers and guides. And I think what we need to be is guides for young people. We need to create vehicles for people to do change. I have we have young people. Everyone has a 2-year-old somewhere around them, and all they want to do inherently in them is to help. They want to come and they want to help, wipe off the table. They want to help stir the pot, and you're thwarting them away. But inherently, what they want to do is help. And so what we need to do is provide vehicles for them to help. And so through Educate Tomorrow, we provide a mentoring program so that folks can volunteer and help people find their way along the path. So I don't actually think that there's any shortage or people feel disenfranchised about having volunteer opportunities. I just don't know that they've had the right kind of volunteer opportunities. So we need to do more. We need to provide more vehicles and guidance so that they can have successful and fulfilling experiences. And Peace Corps is one of those opportunities that I've been given, and we need to do more as leaders for our peers to do the same for them.
Yeah. How about you, Fred? I mean, for the students who come through the academy, they're getting a great education, but how do you motivate them to want to serve and to give back?
I think, just to follow on to her point, I think that there's something addictive about serving. Once you do it and you get exposed, so it's really about getting them exposed. And once they have that exposure, then they want to keep doing it. So it's built into our curriculum. Twice a week, they go out into the communities, and it's a graduation requirement that before they leave the academy, they need to implement a project in one of the communities around the school. So, from this early age of 16, 17, they are really learning that leadership actually is about service. It's not about enriching yourself or gaining power for yourself. It's about serving society. And so that mindset and exposure, and then once they've had that, they love it. And so really that's how we do it.
Great. For both of you, at some point you've made the decision to go big, to go from making small changes in a small community to really expanding to a much broader scale. Briefly, how did you make that leap? What motivated you, and what steps did you take to make that big leap? Virginia?
Okay. I would say there's two words that drive this answer, and it's opportunity and responsibility. And when we're given an opportunity, you need to take it. And so when I talk about how we now have we're helping thousands of kids throughout the United States and working with hundreds of kids in Niger, I didn't start by helping that many kids. We started with Mariama. It was a girl that I knew in my village who I saw all the potential in the world. And so I said, what could I possibly do to help her life be different than what her parents' life was? And so we got her we started a school. And so now she's a 17-year-old girl going to high school. And my plan for her is that she's one day going to run the program that we started. And so it builds. And so we're given an opportunity. We take the opportunity. But then we have a certain responsibility, just like all these folks in this room, is that most Americans will never have the opportunity to meet their president. Most Americans or Peace Corps volunteers will not have the opportunity to meet Director Williams. But you've been given that opportunity, and with that opportunity comes a huge sense of responsibility. And it's just one step. So you have to think, not what can you do in 10 years from now, and not that you eventually hope to raise millions of dollars and completely reform education in your country, but you start with, I'm going to help this young person get into school. And you have conversations with people, figure out what the needs are in your community, and you go step by step by step. And I have big plans for myself in the future, but I know that I have to pay my dues, and I have to put the time in to become the leader that I need to be 20 years from now.
Right. Terrific. Thank you. I think we want to get to hearing from some of you, because I know there's many exciting stories and questions in the audience. We've heard a lot about service, personal motivation, a lot about history, our own personal history and how that motivates us, the need for young people in Africa to have a better understanding of their history, and the responsibility that we all have to help develop young leaders. You're all leaders in the room, and I'm sure you're making great accomplishments, but you have a responsibility, and I'm sure many of you already are, working to develop other young leaders to work with you and to follow behind you. So I think this is a great kind of kickoff for the discussions we're going to have in our small groups. But first, I'd like to have questions from the audience for our panel, or comments, or maybe you'd like to share some of your own examples of leadership. We have microphones that are roaming, and we're ready to hear from you.
Hi, my name is Niger. I'm from Namibia. And my question is to Frederick. Many other times you find people saying, I'm a leader by nature. Do you think people are leaders by nature, or can they be trained to be leaders?
Good question.
The whole question of, are leaders born or are they made? I believe that we all have the potential to be leaders. So in that sense, I guess we're all born leaders. But to really achieve your true potential, you have to develop it. You need to practice leading to become a leader. And, so otherwise there'd be no point in what we're doing. If we didn't believe that that it was possible to create leaders, it wouldn't. And if you haven't read this book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, I would recommend that book, where he talks about how a lot of the leaders who changed the world, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and so on, they didn't just happen. They practiced, at what they were doing, and that's how they created, that's how they became who they were. So I absolutely believe that leaders can be made.
Thank you. Hello? I will start by here. Sorry, I will speak in French. I hope you will have... Bonjour à tous, je suis Marie Tamoifo. Je viens du Cameroun et je suis très intéressée d'apprendre l'histoire de ceux qui travaillent dans le cadre du volontariat et du service. Je suis moi-même leader d'une organisation depuis 2 ans qui fait dans l'environnement et surtout sur la participation de jeunesse. Et actuellement, nous avons un très grand projet que nous voulons véritablement lancer en Afrique. C'est de former des jeunes, c'est de travailler avec des jeunes et de mettre en place tout un réseau de jeunes pour l'environnement, mais ce que nous appelons des jeunes volontaires.
S'il vous plaît?
Oui.
Pour la traduction.
Sure. This is Mary. I'm from Cameroon. She also is with an organization that works with youth, and specifically, she wants to start up an organization that works with youth, specifically in environment.
Well, okay, I will speak in English if I will try.
Sorry.
Okay, my question is not about saying what to do, but we have already some organizations who are working daily on volunteerism in Africa. They are organizations, they are called associations or NGOs, and really the youths work inside those organizations and they look at Peace Corps and other groups outside, and their wish also is to work on service and see how they can volunteer themselves for their community in their countries. We had a plan in working on volunteerism on behalf of African youths. How can the organization in Africa or young organization work on volunteerism, work on social programs, and participate as volunteers like what Peace Corps is doing? Because the problem is not a problem, but most of the time we receive volunteers from outside. And inside our countries, we don't have our own volunteers, own organization who can be like vehicles to others in the communities. So our program for now and what we want to do in Cameroon or in other organization is to put in place local organization working on volunteerism daily, and then having sort of Peace Corps too in Africa who can guide the volunteers in our countries. And my question will be how to do that, because I'm just starting this in Cameroon, but I don't know with whom we are going to discuss about that. Who is going to be the one to train the volunteers, not training them because they have already that in their daily organization things, but also to guide them on how to build this volunteerism service for their communities and for their countries. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if I made myself heard.
Very
in
clear.
English.
Thank you. Very clear.
Well, on a very large scale, there's a program here in the United States that you might want to take a look at, and it's called AmeriCorps, and it's very similar to the Peace Corps, but it's an internal Peace Corps where the folks are trained in the United States and they're delegated to service programs throughout the nation in the United States, but they do 1 year of service, and that might be something to look forward to for your country for the next 5-10 years, but I developed a volunteer program, and so in doing so, we had to create a lot of those materials about how to train volunteers and how to utilize them properly. And many of these organizations exist throughout the nation and have a wealth of resources. So if you do have access to the internet, a lot of these materials of how to recruit and retain are available. You can also look at or send me an email at educatetomorrow.org. Be happy to share with what we have. But it's bringing in volunteers, but then understanding how to use their skills to further your mission. And like I said earlier, it starts small. You start with a group of 10, and 10 turns into 20, and 20 turns into 1,000. And so starting small, but then working your way up. And
great. And I believe that there is a Peace Corps document in your packet that is a great resource on volunteerism and how to start it. I mean, you're already engaged in volunteerism, but how to make it more official. Who has the microphone?
Me.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great.
My name is Irene Mensa. I'm from Benin. Okay. I would like to say something. Thank you to create Educate Tomorrow, because I strongly believe that the development of Africa will happen from 3 things: education, change of mentality, and access to information. I do not believe in flow of lot of money, lot of aid to help Africa. Because even it is charitable aid or aid through Bretton Woods institution, I do not believe that it will help Africa if in Africa we don't change mentality. My question for you is that, do you think that if we have access to education without changing mentality, pouvons-nous parvenir au développement de l'Afrique avec une éducation sans un changement de mentalité? Because if I look at what is happening today in Africa, we have a lot of people who are educated, but they are doing the same thing as those who are not educated. So if the USA, if the government of Obama want to help people of Africa, help us to have access to good information through a high-speed internet, help us to have access to education of high quality, and help us to change mentality. And we could change our continent. We could develop our Africa. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, I think that's probably more a comment, and we really appreciate that. I don't know, Fred, if you want to add anything to that.
No, absolutely. I think that I don't see education and change of mentality as two separate things. I think we need to look at the way we educate such that it brings about a change in mentality. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think that the way we've been educating over the past 50 years is not creating that change in mentality. So, you know, if we change the way we educate, we bring about the change in mentality, and then we can solve our own problems.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So
Merci.
I don't want to ignore this side of the room. I've got lots of hands over here, and somebody has the microphone.
Merci, Abdul Karim Sango du Burkina.
Mm-hmm. This is Abdul from Burkina.
Okay. Je suis très heureux d'entendre l'expérience de Monsieur Fred et puis la dame de Educate.
Tomorrow. He is very happy to hear about your experiences with both of your organizations.
Je suis enseignant de profession. Ma petite expérience, c'est que en Afrique, les gens ont des potentialités, mais ils n'ont pas confiance en eux. Et allez-y.
Sure. They have a lot of experience, but not a lot of confidence.
Vous voyez, c'est très intéressant. La dame a dit tout de suite, elle est issue d'une famille qui n'est pas très riche. Mais en Afrique, dès que quelqu'un émerge, il a peur d'assumer son histoire.
He's very interested in your experiences coming up with a very large family that was also poor and very similar to African families, although African families, when they grow up, sometimes it's not the same.
Donc ma question, elle va à Fred, comme il est un peu plus proche de nous. Quel mécanisme nous devons utiliser pour aider les jeunes Africains à avoir confiance en eux afin d'utiliser très bien leur potentialité?
What mechanisms can Africans use to develop themselves and gain confidence, such as like what you did?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Fred? Great, thank you.
It's for Fred.
I think it's about, once again, it goes back to education. And I think one of the things that, this is why I'm so passionate about having an African-centered education, because if you only learn about the rest of the world, how can you feel proud of being African? You know, if you only, you know, read Shakespeare and Chaucer and you don't read Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Wole Soyinka, how can you think that we have our own African literature? And so, yeah. And that's where the confidence comes from. It's from seeing and believing that, you know, we're not just one basket case. We have tremendous opportunities, and that Africa is really a land of opportunity, and it's our generation, you know, to make it happen. And so that is what we need to do. And with that, then, you know, we can't be stopped by the world.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Okay, I have the mic here.
So, and we're going to make your question, unfortunately, the last question, but you're going to have lots of opportunities to speak and talk during our small group session and over lunch.
Thanks very much for making me the last. My question is to Fred. It's just a short question. I think your idea is brilliant. I'm Masimba Nyaman from Zimbabwe. Well, I know that if you ask around this room, there are many African countries where they have youth leadership academies or leadership trainings, as it were. That's the case from where I come from in Zimbabwe. We have 2 or 3. Don't you think that it's a good idea for you to have synergies with these youth leadership academies from other young African countries or from other countries so that you maximize your impact and synergies?
No, I mean, absolutely. We currently have partnerships with about 3,000 schools across Africa and organizations that are working with young people, young leaders, and they feed us our candidates. But as I mentioned earlier, what we want to do is to take what we're doing in South Africa and spread it to schools throughout Africa, so that what we're doing can be replicated across the continent. Yeah, so definitely I agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you all very much for your questions, and thank you, Fred, for that. I think when you talk about replicating what you're doing and leveraging and scaling up and jumping off, I mean, I think that's what we all want to talk about today and going forward. And even when you go home, how do we motivate ourselves to give back even more? And then how do we motivate young people who have yet to understand the value of community service and civic engagement? That's really what we want and hope will be an outcome of your discussions today. And I want to thank both of the panelists for sharing their stories and their examples and really getting us thinking about ways in which we can take our organizations to the same level. So thank you very much.